Welcome to the Explainer. Okay, let's just dive right into this. We are looking at what is arguably one of the most famous transitions in all of literature. That dramatic, unforgettable shift from the mundane reality of the everyday world straight into a realm of pure, unadulterated dream logic. We're exploring Chapter 1 of Lewis Carroll's absolute classic, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. And honestly, it is a masterclass in how to completely pull an audience out of their comfort zone and just plunge them headfirst into the unknown. So we're going to break down exactly how Alice's famous journey begins, tracing her literal and psychological descent right down the rabbit hole.
You see, Carroll doesn't start us off in some magical, whimsical land. Actually, he starts us in the most boring, sleepy setting imaginable, which makes the contrast that much sharper. Just picture Alice's reality for a second. She's sitting on a riverbank with her sister on a sweltering hot day, feeling completely sleepy and, in her own words, stupid. She's sitting there literally debating if the sheer pleasure of making a daisy chain is even worth the effort of getting up to pick the flowers. It is completely, utterly mundane. But then, enter our absurd catalyst. A white rabbit with pink eyes runs close by her. And what's so brilliant here is that Alice initially doesn't even think it's weird. It's only when the rabbit actually pulls a pocket watch out of a waistcoat pocket that her brain finally catches up and realizes, wait a minute, rabbits don't wear clothes, and they definitely don't tell time.
And that brings us to the very first spoken words of the entire story. Oh dear, I shall be late. The rabbit isn't just dressed up like a Victorian gentleman. He is actively experiencing a very human, very modern anxiety. I mean, he's frantic because he's running behind schedule. This worry about time completely shatters Alice's sleepy little afternoon. Suddenly, she is burning with curiosity. She runs across the field, sees the rabbit pop down a large hole under the hedge, and, without a single thought about how she's ever going to get back out, she just follows him down in the very next moment. It's that sheer, burning curiosity that draws Alice and us as the audience directly down the rabbit hole. So Alice suddenly finds herself falling down a very, very deep well, and Carroll uses this long, slow, vertical descent to systematically just strip away real-world logic. First, she's passing cupboards and bookshelves built right into the sides of the well itself. Then she casually grabs a jar of orange marmalade as she passes, finds to her great disappointment that it's completely empty, and carefully stows it in another cupboard as she falls. Why? So she doesn't drop it on somebody below. Her primary concern while falling down a bottomless pit is still, polite Victorian manners. As she keeps falling, she starts pondering geography, trying to figure out if she's nearing the center of the earth, before finally just evolving into this dreamy state where she's mumbling to herself about her pet cat. It's fascinating because while she's falling, Alice desperately attempts to cling to her real-world schoolroom education to make sense of her bizarre environment. She calculates aloud that she must have fallen about 4,000 miles down. She even starts throwing around big words like latitude and longitude. Now, she admits to herself she has absolutely no idea what those words actually mean, but she thinks they sound really nice and grand to say. She wonders if she'll fall right through the earth and come out among people walking with their heads downward, who she mistakenly calls the antipathies instead of the antipodes. It's such a perfect look at how a child's mind tries to apply rigid, learned logic to an entirely illogical, completely impossible situation. But eventually, that rigid logic just gives out entirely. Down, down, down she goes, until her rational thought completely devolves into sleepy, nonsensical riddles. She starts asking the empty air, do cats eat bats? And then she flips it to, do bats eat cats? And since she can't answer either question, she just concludes it doesn't really matter which way she asks it. She's dozing off at this point, dreaming about walking hand in hand with her cat, Dinah, completely surrendering to the dream logic of the fall. And it is right at this exact moment of total cognitive surrender that, thump-thump, she finally lands on a heap of sticks and dry leaves. The incredibly long fall is over, and miraculously, she isn't hurt a bit. Instantly, she jumps right back onto her feet, and what does she see? The white rabbit. He's still hurrying down a long passage ahead of her, muttering to himself, "Oh, my ears and whiskers, how late it's getting." Alice races after him like the wind, getting there just in time to hear him say this as he turns a corner. But when she rounds that exact same corner, the rabbit is nowhere to be seen. He just vanishes entirely. The high-speed chase is suddenly over, and Alice is left completely alone in a long, low hall lit by a row of hanging lamps. The frantic pacing abruptly halts right here, and we basically transition from a chase sequence into a full-blown escape room puzzle. So, the crucial point now is looking at how Alice attempts to navigate this new, deeply illogical space. We get to see her methodical puzzle-solving methodology in action. Step 1. She walks all the way down one side of the hall and up the other, testing every single big door.
Unfortunately, they are all firmly locked. Step 2. She's pacing sadly down the middle, wondering how she'll ever get out, when she discovers this little 3-legged table made of solid glass. And there's nothing on it but a tiny golden key. But alas, the key doesn't fit any of the big doors. Finally, we hit step 3. On her second lap around the room, she notices a low curtain she had totally missed before, and behind it, she uncovers a tiny door, only about 15 inches high. She desperately longs to escape that dark hall and go into the garden. But there's a massive physical limitation here. I mean, even if she could somehow squeeze her head through the tiny doorway, her shoulders absolutely will not fit. She tries the tiny golden key in the lock of the little 15-inch door, and to her immense delight, it actually fits perfectly. She opens it and looks down a small passage, no larger than a rat hole really, into what she describes as the loveliest garden you ever saw, just full of bright flowers and cool fountains. She has officially cracked the lock, but her physical size prevents her from entering. She literally wishes out loud that she could just shut up like a telescope.
Now, what's really interesting here is how Carol provides the solution to her problem, but he wraps it entirely in risk. Alice goes back to the glass table, honestly half hoping she'll find a book of rules on how to shut people up like telescopes. But instead, she finds magical consumables. First, she finds a little bottle with a paper label beautifully printed with the words, "Drink me." And later, under the table, she'll find a small glass box containing a cake with "Eat me" beautifully marked out in currants. What's so brilliant here is Alice's extreme caution. Before touching the Drink Me bottle, she wisely checks to see if it's marked poison. She actually remembers all the grim stories she's read about children getting burned or eaten by wild beasts simply because they didn't follow the rules. Seeing that the bottle isn't marked poison, she cautiously decides to give it a taste. And wow, it has an absurdly complex flavor profile. It's not just sweet or sour. Finding it very nice, she realizes it tastes like a mixed flavor of cherry tart, custard, pineapple, roast turkey, toffee, and hot buttered toast, literally all at once. It's so delicious, she just finishes it right off. And the effect is immediate. She gets that exact feeling she had wished for. She starts shrinking up like a telescope. The potion rapidly shrinks her down, but she's smart. She actually waits a few minutes just to make sure she doesn't shrink away entirely, nervously wondering what the flame of a candle looks like after it's blown out. Such a wonderfully weird thought, right? Okay, so once the shrinking safely stops, we arrive at this incredibly frustrating situation. She is now only 10 inches tall. Her face brightens up because she is finally the perfect size to slip through that little door and out into the beautiful garden. But there is a cruel, cruel irony here. She left the little golden key sitting right on top of the glass table. And now that she's 10 inches tall, the tabletop completely towers above her. She can see the key quite plainly through the glass, but the legs of the table are simply too slippery to climb. She tries her absolute best, slipping and sliding until she's utterly exhausted. And finally, the poor little thing just sits down on the floor and begins to cry. And this brilliantly illustrates a very specific and honestly fascinating psychological quirk of Alice's character. She loves pretending to be two people. Alice has this curious habit of giving herself advice and scolding herself. Sitting there crying, she sharply tells herself, "I advise you to leave off this minute." She actually scolds herself so severely that it brings fresh tears to her eyes. The text even notes she once tried to box her own ears for having cheated herself at a game of croquet. It perfectly shows how her strict, proper Victorian upbringing is violently clashing with her current tiny, helpless state in this bizarre underground room. She tells herself it's no use pretending to be two people now, because there's hardly enough of her left to make one respectable person. Realizing that crying definitely won't solve anything, her eye falls on that little glass box under the table containing the Eat Me cake. And her purely logical resignation right here is just fascinating. She completely adapts to Wonderland's unhinged rules in an instant. She reasons it out perfectly. Look, if I eat this cake and it makes me grow larger, I can reach the key on the table. If it makes me grow smaller, I'll be tiny enough to just creep right under the bottom of the 15-inch door. Either outcome completely solves her immediate problem of getting into the garden. As she boldly declares, "I don't care which happens." It's a really wonderful moment of a child embracing the absolute absurdity of her situation just to solve a puzzle. So she eats a little bit of the cake, puts her hand anxiously on top of her head to feel if she's growing up or down, and asks the air, "Which way? Which way?" Astonishingly, she is quite surprised to find she remains exactly the same size. Now, to be sure, this is what generally happens when one eats cake in the real world, but Alice has gotten so used to out-of-the-way things happening that normalcy actually feels quite dull and stupid to her. So she sets back to work and very soon finishes off the entire cake. And that is exactly where Chapter 1 leaves us hanging. So I'll leave you with this provocative question to ponder.
What would you do in a world where the basic rules of reality no longer apply? Would you cling to your old logic, or would you just eat the cake and see what happens? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the impossible.